Well, football's back, and that means our weekly conversations with Nick Eatman, who has covered the Dallas Cowboys for the last couple of decades for the team's website. These are back as well. I'm Adam Kaufman. Nick, how are you, my friend?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm real good. I'm happy that we get to talk football again, and we're not just, when's Dak going to get his contract? Is
Right.
Dak going to return this year? Is he healthy enough? We can jump right in with Dak Prescott because your team, the Dallas Cowboys, and the defending champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers were the first two teams of the NFL season to take the field. And honestly, it was a thriller. It was a great game, a lot of fun to watch, back and forth. Really, many might say should have been a Cowboys win. The late comeback escape there for Tampa Bay at home. But the biggest story of that night had to be Dak Prescott. Looked like he didn't miss a beat.
No, and you saw it on his first throw. It was backed up his own 2-yard line into the end zone. It was like, welcome back, Dak. He said, yeah, no problem. Just throws a 30-yard pass down the left sideline. I mean, if there was any rust, we didn't see it. And it was amazing. It was an amazing performance. I thought it was probably his best performance that I can remember. And I know they didn't win the game, but just he was so cool, calm. And I have said this kind of leading up to this game. I don't think they're going to get blown out of many games at all. He's that kind of fighter. He'll bring him back, and he did in that game, and he actually had a chance to win it. So, I thought, he wasn't perfect. He had a couple of plays he'd like to take back, but, he carried that team, and I think if they play like that, they're going to win a lot more games this year.
A few touchdowns for him. He passed for north of 400 yards. He went 42 of 58, which is just absolutely ridiculous in your first game coming back, having not played in several months, not quite a year, obviously, but a long time going back to week 5 last year. So it's not even just ability wise he picked up where he left off, but statistically that ridiculous pace he was on before the injury, he's right on back to it.
Yeah. And I thought that was maybe a product of the game of, the 58 passes. A lot of those passes are little swing, bubble screens and stuff, because they found out early, they already knew they weren't going to be able to run the football. They were not going to be able to go in there and pound it in between the tackles, not with who they were playing and who they had in the lineup. So, it was just it was a perfect storm to say, hey, let's attack the outside. Let's get a lot of throws. There weren't a ton of throws down the field. It was just a lot of short, methodical plays. But it was working, and that works until you get into the red zone. And that's where I think that, really affected the game. They couldn't score touchdowns in there and ultimately kick too many field goals, or even not enough field goals, actually.
We'll get back to some individual play, but just on the whole, going into a game like that, it's sort of, teams don't like to necessarily have these in week 1, but immediately it's kind of a statement game, obviously, when you're going up against the defending champs. And that was a very winnable game. Again, many would say probably should have won. A better kicking game. It's definitely a win.
Yeah.
So, how much confidence does that instill in the Cowboys, even in spite of the loss?
Yeah, there's not a moral victory at all. And I think that's where that term has been kind of floated out a little bit. And I think once you start accepting losses and getting excited about them, then, yeah, you have a problem. But I do think, like you said, there's something to be encouraged about. And I think the advantage that the Cowboys have versus other teams is other teams can be excited about their wins. There's 16 teams with a win. They can be excited about them. But you still don't know who you really played, and you don't know who you are. I think the Cowboys have the best idea of who their opponent is than anybody else, because you're talking about the defending champs that returned everybody, and they've got Tom Brady, which you know exactly what Tom Brady's going to be right now. So, we all know the Bucs are going to be there, and the Bucs are going to be good. And so that it's a very good benchmark game for the Cowboys. There's going to be a lot of teams in week 2 that either won or lost that will flip the script and surprise their fan bases. Cowboys could be one of them if they go and play poorly against the Chargers. But I just think that this is a good sign, an arrow pointing up, that if you play like that, you're gonna have a lot more success than you did last year.
Nick, we spent a lot of time last season talking about just how historically bad that defense was. And I know allowing 31 points opening night is not great, but you can't acknowledge that without also acknowledging the 4 takeaways, especially when it's Tampa and Tom Brady on the other side. And yes, some of that's opportunistic, like an interception in the end zone on a Hail Mary at the end of the half, that type of thing. But look, 4 takeaways is 4 takeaways. So how big a step in the right direction was that?
Well, a huge step, because like you said, maybe one of them was a Hail Mary that can go either way. You hope it doesn't go either way. I mean, it's you don't want it to go 50-50 ball, but you know, they made the interception and nearly did something with it. But the other three were really plays that they forced it. They knocked the ball out. They jarred it loose. They hurried Tom Brady into a bad throw. So you want them to be aggressive and be opportunistic and get the ball and all that. So I really look at all four of those turnovers as signs of you know, taking advantage. I say it all the time. If someone gives you a gift, you better open it. You know, don't give it back to them. and they were able to do that. So you know, if you get 4 turnovers and your team's scoring close to 30 points, I promise you're not going to be facing quarterbacks like Tom Brady and a defense and a coach team like that. And so I keep saying it. I know, but I just think that it's a good trend to have, because I think the Cowboys are going in the right direction.
Nick, general terms, you remember what you told me the Cowboys needed in the draft last year?
They needed a badass.
That's right. Needed a BA. Well, it looks like you got one, my friend. Micah Parsons came in. Wasn't just arguably the best, you know, rookie defender on the field for Dallas in that game. He was arguably the best defender, period, for Dallas in that game. Had 7 tackles, a pass deflection. Looks like you got the BA.
Yeah, and you know, he didn't play his best game. Well, it was his first game, so you know, it was his best game. But you know, they think he could play better than that in the first half. First half, he was a little bit, you know, I wouldn't say lost, but his head was spinning a little bit, and I'm sure Brady had something to do with that. He looked a lot more relaxed, calmed down, playing with a little bit more juice and intensity in that second half, and I think he'll only get better and better. So, you know, he's the most amazing part, I think, about Micah Parsons is not just what he does when the ball is snapped. It's his ability to play at so many different levels. They are putting a lot of things on his plate. He's lining up at about 6 different spots, and you got to be mentally capable of doing that, and he has done that. So that's what's really been impressive. And he's going to be that guy that the quarterbacks have to look and find, where's 11, where's Micah Parsons, because he's going to be that dynamic.
So Ezekiel Elliott, 39 total yards on the ground, or in general, all-purpose yards in that first game, 33 on the ground, 6 in the air on a couple of catches. Obviously, it was not a good game for him. Now, you can say that knowing in the same breath that this Tampa defense is legit. It's a strong defensive front. It was, you know, maybe a little bit of a tough go for Zeke on social media. Even his mom, if I can put it this way, has been out there defending him against his critics. I think that's maybe the safest way to do it so that we can continue this conversation. But was it again just that really strong Tampa defense, or was it a sign of things to come?
I don't know yet if it's a sign of things to come. I think it was a difference in the way Kellen Moore calls the plays. I think in the past, with the way they structured their team, it was big offensive line. We got Zeke. We're a run, ground and pound football team, and we do what we do. You know, that's that whole mantra. So we're not worried about you. We're going to do what we do. Well, that doesn't work when you're not better than the other team. And you have to kind of set the ego aside and say, how can we win? How can we be effective? And we can keep running into this brick wall. We've got 2 inexperienced interior linemen going up against the world champs, and that's their strength. Our weakness is up against their strength, especially with Zach Martin out. So let's don't play it that way. Let's go sideline to sideline, and that takes the ball out of Zeke's hands a little bit, and that's the way it went. I don't think every game will be that way. I think there'll be games where, you know, they'll have leads and they can play and run and play more downhill, and I think you'll see Zeke in there a lot more. Fantasy owners are probably pissed of where they drafted him and all that stuff. But I do think that, you know, or where they paid, or how much they paid for him, you know, in leagues like that. But, you know, I think for the most part, he'll be fine. I want to see it a few more weeks before I just dismiss him in the running game.
Tell you what fantasy owners are happy about. Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. How happy are these guys to have Dak Prescott back on the field, because they both go for 100-plus yards. They're each targeted 15-plus times. Last year, Cooper only had 2 100-yard games after Dak went down. Lamb never hit it after Prescott got hurt. So, I mean, again, this has to be significant for those guys.
Yeah, you said it. I mean, you know, especially in those points per catch league, when it's just getting the ball out quick, a lot of catches, a lot of, you know, racking up and see if they can go and make tackles and make plays. I think they're going to miss Michael Gallup. I think Gallup helps with that. He's got a deep threat, and then, you know, with him on the field, you have to be, you know, cognizant of him. And I do think those other guys, you know, got some yards, and it always will flip around, you know, in the next game. would be, more of a Gallup. So with him being out for, 3 to 4 or 5 weeks here with a calf injury, it's going to be significant. But I still think Cedric Wilson will step up. I think the tight ends can step up. And I think that it'll allow CD and Amari to still have some big numbers.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Michael Gallup. There's a lot going on personnel-wise for this team. We'll kind of lump it all into one question. Gallup on injured reserve, of course. As we know, Lael Collins is suspended, so he's unavailable right now. You have Randy Gregory, he's on the COVID list. You have Zach Martin, who's now off the COVID list, which is significant for that offensive line. But, among those 4 players, I guess, or personnel in general, is Martin's return the biggest news or something more significant?
Well, I think it's a big news. Yeah, I think it's probably the biggest, just because I think that it will allow them to not be one-dimensional like they were against Tampa. And that's they did their best. I mean, they almost won that game, despite of the running game. But I still think at the end of the day, when you think about the last drive and how if they could have run it a little bit more and shoot up a little bit more time, you got a little bit more yards, when it was 3rd and 10 or 12, if you could maybe run some and try to eat up some yards and clock, then they could have won the game. So I think being one-dimensional probably hurt them. And I think that getting Zach Martin back, getting him in the middle, he's going to play right guard. He's not moving out to tackle. He's going to play right guard. I think that that'll help them be a little bit more balanced.
Cowboys have the Chargers on the road in week 2. LA coming off a narrow win against Washington in its opener. So what's the outlook for Sunday?
Well, I mean, it's going to be an awesome atmosphere. It's the second time they play at SoFi Stadium, first time with fans, so it'll be a little bit louder, I'm sure. This is the first game with fans for the Chargers at home, so we'll kind of see. But I do think it'll be a lot of Cowboy fans there. I think it'll be a good atmosphere. And like I say all the time, week 2, to me, is always the biggest game of the season, even bigger than game 1, and for me, for all teams. If you win, you need to make sure and build off that. You don't want to be in that 1-1 because that gets you to 8-8, Bill, as the Cowboys have done so many times. You want to be in that 2-0. And if you go 0-1, you certainly don't want to go in the 0-2. So I always put a lot of emphasis in the week 2 game, and especially if you lose. And I think that this will be a big one for the Cowboys, but it won't be easy because, I mean, you're facing, quarterback and an offensive passing game, Keenan Allen and Herbert and all those guys. And then Joey Bosa on the other side is probably licking his chops to think whoever they're going to start at right tackle. So it won't be an easy game, but I think if they play the way they played the other night, I think they certainly can win.
Before I let you go, just because you had brought up expectations for this team overall and the fact that even feeling better about them 0-1 than necessarily 0-0 going into the season, and I'm sure you had a week 1 loss penciled in against Tampa. So what was your prediction going into the season for the year?
I had them in around the 10-7 range, and that's probably where I still would have them. I think if you would win that game, you'd be thinking better. Everybody would have been thinking better than 10-7 if you beat Tampa Bay, and that's how close they were. But I mean, 10-7, I'm going to stick with that. I'm not sure if that wins the NFC East. That it certainly would have last year, but divisions go like that. It'll when everybody's bad, then there'll be years when everyone's good, and I don't know if we're at that point yet. But I bet we're at a point where they're going to be a lot more competitive this year. So, it's going to be tough. At 10-7 could be a dogfight to get there.
Nick Eatman, always a pleasure, my friend.
All right. See you guys.